There were so many amazing moments during season 1 of the PeopleNova podcast. We decided to recap the season, sharing my favorite quote from Darren Walker and a few responses to my favorite question. What is your favorite art? All along the season, we discussed empathy, growth mindset, superpowers, and many more amazing conversations. Darren Walker said, "Without art, there is no empathy. Without empathy, there is no justice." Stay tuned for next season, where we will continue to have art, empathy, and justice. With so many artistic expressions in the world, you are bound to find a piece of art that impacts your life the most, and I would love to hear what that is for you. Go ahead and write it in the comments, leave it in your review of the podcast, or find PeopleNova on social media. And if you stay tuned to the end of the podcast, you get to hear about my favorite art.
I am Adrienne Jefferson. My current position is with the City of New Haven as the Director of Arts, Culture, and Tourism, or the Director of Arts and Cultural Affairs. I'm also the Executive Director of New Haven Festivals, which is the nonprofit arm of the department. I would have to say, if I had to be specific about a piece of art that has impacted my life the most, it's actually a portrait of Malcolm X. Ooh. That, and the artist, the name is not in my brain right now, but it's a portrait of Malcolm X. We've all seen this portrait. He's looking out the window. He's at the window with the gun and looking out to protect his family. Oh. And obviously that started off as a picture, but I've seen this in a portrait that actually hangs in a good friend of mine's house. And I just cannot remember the artist who did it, a rendition of that picture. But that, for me, honestly, is probably my favorite piece of artwork ever. Yeah. And I think for me, though, it's just because it's really personal. Like, it's the story of Malcolm X is a story I've known since I was 6 years old, and I've been exposed to since I was 6. And his radicalism and his revolutionary mindset has always been, honestly, like, I admire that man so much, and it's always been really impactful in my work. And so for me, that picture, though, humanizes him. And it humanizes him because he's protecting his family. That's why he was at the window with his gun and looking out. And it made me just think about, well, what was he going through internally? Was he afraid? Was he feeling betrayed? What was he experiencing from a human soul perspective? That's actually probably, this is the first time I've ever actually thought about it. I love so much stuff that I'm like, I don't know. But Malcolm X, that picture of Malcolm X. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh, nobody's ever asked me.
Well, you put me on the spot, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
I love it. I'm actually incredibly inspired. I saw a piece it was a very specific piece at the ICA, Institute of Contemporary Art. It was a sculpture, series of wires hanging from the ceiling. And it had different bits of charred wood attached to them. And it was just in a very kind of abstract, right? And it was an artist, I think it's Cornelia Parker. The name of the art piece is Hanging Fire Suspected Arson. And it actually leverages a Japanese technique called shosugiban, which burns wood. So shosugiban was created in Japan. So this is like my favorite modality. And this is the art that I produce because that shosugiban, it carbonizes the wood. It doesn't destroy it. Everyone likes to think of fire and flame as destructive, but it's really transformational, and it transforms the wood into a preserved piece. Just the carbon protects it, right? The inner cup of joy is protected. Oh my God, here we go, meta.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
It almost reminds me of the guy who did, who they featured in Just Mercy, the story of Just Mercy.
Brian Stevenson.
Thank you.
Yep.
He also has a new museum that is, it's commemorating and remembering all of the places all across the nation where lynching took place. And there's these you walk through this pathway, this open pathway that has a ceiling with these like poles hanging down, and then these wood bearings hanging down on different levels that represent all of the bodies and the people. And when I tell you, I haven't seen it in person, I've seen it online. It is breathtaking. And each city they can claim their block.
lynchings.
Yeah.
And the name of the victims are on the block. Yeah. Incredibly impactful.
Yeah. What you would describe, it's different, but it reminds me of that. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, that's what art's supposed to do. It's supposed to trigger different, feelings. And at the start of the show, I talked about Ashanti Branch and the mask within, right? And
yes.
And you mentioned the portrait of Malcolm X. Like, what is he feeling inside, right behind the mask? Which I think, again, if we can identify with each other as soulful beings that are having these feelings within the mask, then we can really start to identify with another person's humanity. I think art is a really great example to like really explore, what are those poignant pieces for you, and what are those pieces that resonate? How do we keep that feeling of love?
I think art, at the end of the day, art connects us all. And as cliche as that sounds, it's actually the truth. It allows us to connect to people in ways that we may have never thought that we would be able to connect a person. It allows us to humanize people. I keep saying humanize because it's true. It allows us to have conversation with people we're conflicted with, because art is subjective. And so it's very in perspective on what we're looking at, right? And so that's also how, like, if we view the world as art, if we view conversations as art, if we view everything, even conflict, as art, then we can actually approach it from a way that allows us to get to the root of things, because of the fact that it's all subjective, right? Yeah. And none of it really is, well, this is just my opinion. None of it really is real. Like, at the end of the day, right? There's yin and there's yang, like, which I'm like, right? There's things just are. And then there's perspective around what is. And then there's actually what is. Like, there's actually what is. And a lot of times it's what you said, like, we're making up these things in our mind that perpetuate conflict, that perpetuate all of these different things, when really that's just our perspective. What is. Here's the concrete fact, opposed to all of these other abstract thoughts we're having around it. And so I think art allows us to tackle that, the root of that. And being able to understand the varying perspective, and then really being able to scale it back and see, well, what is it really? And that's the way I see it. Like, literally, that's the only way I can describe it. It may be confusing to some people, but that's literally how I see it.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. I really bring in art into my practice and into my world, because I finally realized how important art and creativity is, and recognizing that every culture has an art medium or form or creative expression.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I think for me, because you got to remember, in my role here, but even when I was at the state, it's arts and culture. And a lot of times we get so focused on arts that we leave out the culture component.
Yeah.
But culture really is it's broader than just the arts lens. Culture means everything, like even the conversations we're talking about right now, normalizing things. It could be mental health and trauma. It could be thinking about, anything literally can be culture, and have a lens on how we shape and reshape something, and how we perceive it. And it can be through the arts, right? The arts is a part of this culture. Entertainment could be a part of this culture. Politics and economics could be a part of this culture. Mental health could be a part of this culture. Culture is really what sets the foundation for us to really realize that we're all operating essentially in one human culture, and just figuring it all out. That allows us to broaden the playing field, to be honest.
It's like that invisible, like, the air we breathe. Culture is the air we breathe, right? Like, how do we talk about it? How do we move through it in a way that we can start to describe culture?
Mm. That's the you can't describe culture. That's the thing. There's a space for everyone in culture. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's
I
a
like that.
space for everyone. Um, and I just like it because even when it comes to conversations that are very difficult and hard, I think that culture, when we're looking at it through a lens of culture, it really allows us to broaden why we're even having the conversation. Art is the avenue, right? It's the
Mhm,
vehicle, but changing culture, that's the why. That's
mhm,
the why. Changing, reshaping,
mhm,
figuring out a culture that supports all types of people, figuring out a culture that's diverse, inclusive, equitable, just,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
That's the why. So it's really about culture, and art is part of the avenue to how we're reshaping and shifting and thinking about culture.
mhm. I
And
love
there's
it.
room for everyone in culture.
There's room for everyone, right? It's not a binary, it's not a pie, right? Like, no one is excluded. You are part of this culture. How do we get more people to understand that?
Well, I think it's about um, it, them understanding, getting them to understand that we're not saying forget your individual culture or your where you come from or what you know what I mean. We're not
Mhm.
saying that. What we're saying is people have sub tribes, subgroups that they operate in, different semi cultures, small cultures, right? And we're not saying that you can't honor where you have come from, right? The history of who you are, not to honor that. We're saying, think about that and how it impacts, how does it interact with the bigger culture of what we're trying to shift and change? I
Mhm.
think that a lot of times there's this scarcity issue that happens. And it happens with all types of people, all people of no matter your color, definitely happens in the Black and Brown community. And definitely we see it happening with white people who think that because we're being more equitable and diverse, where's the place for me? Where do I exist? If I give you this, the pie's not big enough. And this is a lot of times why people don't want to bend. But if we can
Mm,
get them to understand that number one, the playing field has never been equal. So we're just catching up. We're not taking from you. We're just trying to catch up. That's
yep,
it. That's it,
yep,
right? Right. If
yep.
we can get people to understand that we're not trying to strip you of what you have. We're not trying to strip you of what you have. We're just trying to say, let's create a culture that's equal and equitable and just for everybody.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
And I think it starts with getting people to understand we're not trying to take from you. That's not the point here.
yeah. It's been interesting to see my white friends and my white colleagues and kind of how they're um, slowly going into this conversation about racism. And when it comes up as a as a pie, as a binary, I'm like, ooh, not so much, right? And then I shift and I start talking about growth, Carol Dweck and the growth mindset, right? Like, this is not a fixed outcome. There was no one good. It's art. It's all subjective, right?
Yeah.
It's culture. A lot of
Right.
different things contribute to it. So, um, feeling like we have to win, right? Or it has to be perfect. Oof, I will tell everyone I am a recovering perfectionist, right?
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
And the more that I think I really share that with other people more to convince myself that it's
Yeah.
okay to learn, right? And it's okay to make mistakes, right? Because that's how, as long as we're genuine about that, right? And not
Mm,
trying to um make other people feel the way that we might feel inside,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we acknowledge that and kind of separate that, right? And that takes a lot of self-work.
It does. And what you just said reminds me of the term we are responsible for the energy we bring into a room. We are responsible for the energy we bring into a space, or we are responsible for the energy we bring to someone else. And that's accountability. Now, self-work takes accountability. That's
Yeah.
why people don't always want to do it,
Yeah.
because you have to be really honest and really true about what it is, the good and the bad within yourself. And I think a lot of people don't want to face the truth. And but that's but what you just said reminds me of that.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Pamela Rosario Perez. Pamela Michelle Rosario Perez, if you guys want to go off of the birth certificate. And yeah, I am a program manager of customer experience at a cybersecurity company. And I'm also the CEO founder of a real estate investment group. Recently, I actually wrote an article on supporting Black, especially Black trans artists, creators, bakers, vendors. And I just love how, especially in the Black and Brown community, we've been able to, I feel like our resilience has also been able to come through our music, our art, our creations. Even a lot of the things that were, a lot of the art that before was called ghetto, braids or like the hoop earrings or whatever aesthetics, like people are now, you see it now on, Balmain's runway. You see it on Versace's runway. And now things are being appropriated by these other people. And now it's fun. Now it's artistic. But it's like, this has always been our art. This has been our way to survive and express and show the beauty in just the whole, our beings, the whole community. I always was fascinated by just surrealist art. By a lot of wartime art, especially resistance art. I would have to say, like, one of my favorite artists for a very long time was Salvador Dali. Definitely has his issues. Anti-Semitism, racism. He's a problem. He's one of those people we call problematic fave. Very problematic. But the reason why I really loved, his art, the melting clocks, the surrealists, was just because him, similar to Picasso, they were just coming at a time when people wanted things to just be very like beautiful and pleasant. And he put unpleasant things in front of them.
Love it.
And then they made this art, they put it in museums. But at the end of the day, when you look at some of his work, it doesn't necessarily make you feel fuzzy inside. I feel like sometimes people who have been historically disenfranchised or marginalized, we have thought that a way to be included and embraced is by being beautiful, by agreeing.
Fit into a norm.
Yes.
And you'll be accepted. Oh, that's tragic.
By being pleasant, by speaking proper. And not necessarily speaking in the way that you want to speak.
Truthful and tragic at the same time. Yeah.
Exactly. Or just being authentically you. And I feel like with his art, the fact that he was able to create some crazy paintings and they're hung in a museum. And when he had some issues, he created his own museum. I love the fearlessness. And that is something that whenever I'm teaching, I try to instill in my students. Be fearless, be whoever you are. If your investment strategy is stocks or real estate or you want to do something completely different, do it. Discover a whole new way of making money. Like put just who you are out there. Yeah. And if people don't embrace you, then they are not your people. That's okay. Yeah. That's okay. So that is part of the reason why I really love art that is not necessarily aesthetically pleasing or makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside, but really has you confront a particular reality or has you think about certain things that are not always top of mind. And then post artisans, one of the people in my top 3 is actually Ariel Matisse. Yes. So I fell in love with her art. She does a lot of different sculptures. My favorite things that she does are the wire sculptures. To see her transform something so ordinary into these beautiful creations, whether it's a face, a horse, tree, a whole forest with just wire. I remember when I went to Artisans and Lawyers was showing me around, I stood in her workspace and I was just like, who did this? How is this possible? I had no idea who she was. I was just so impressed, not only by her talent, but also by just the creativity of humans. And it was one of those things where it's like, I remember being in elementary school, middle school, and seeing kids just playing around, fidgeting with, either wire or with clay or with there were these little plastic cords that we would just interweave and whatever. I wonder how many of those kids still do that. I wonder how many of those kids are selling their art. I wonder how many of those kids have abandoned. And I feel that probably 99% of those kids, now adults, have abandoned that art.
There's so many, I agree with you. There's so many adults that have stifled their creativity. And I'm like, no, it's in there. Let it out. You are all creative. There is a place for you. Not only do adults need creativity, but youth do as well. And we need to encourage that in the youth to help them keep creating.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I speak with a lot of different families, I do ask about what is the culture that you're coming from? You know, and even like with their religious beliefs, what are their religious beliefs? Because I've noticed that sometimes they have cut some of their kids' dreams short because they feel that it is in disagreement with their religious beliefs, right? So it's coming out of a place of love in a way, right? Yep. So I've had to have conversations with them with like, you know, hey, being a singer does not mean that you will be in bars singing every night and that you're going to be in an environment where you may get shot or your kid will be in danger, whatever the case may be.
Challenge your moral fabric. Like there's options.
Right, exactly. So it's like even having these open conversations have been really helpful for them to understand like, oh, these things can coexist. Because I feel at times like a lot of us, just for survival, you know, because we come from certain backgrounds where maybe we were poor or maybe we had absent, even physically or mentally, emotionally absent parents, and we want to be the opposite of that. We then sometimes treat the world as black and white and we make these super regimented lives for ourselves. And once we, let's say, get into the middle class or whatever the case may be, we continue rising, we put that same, you know, those blinders on our kids because this is the way that I succeeded. So this is the way that you will succeed. And it's like, you know, I've had to learn as well, like some of the things that help me survive the hood and the village and all that are things that I have to like acknowledge, clap for them, thank them. And then as I evolve, I'm going to have to adopt a different skill set. And
beautiful.
I'm gonna have to adopt a different mindset. And the same thing once I get to the next point. Like, I think that there is definitely, and that is something that I've had to learn. And once I learned it, I started sharing it. And it was incredible how so many people were like, wow, actually, yeah, you're right. Like, why am I still, like, I'm comfortable. Why am I still operating with this, like, you're hungry, survival, and putting this pressure that is absolutely unnecessary on my kids or on people around me. So absolutely, you know, to your point, I do think it's extremely important to understand the cultural environment and that belief system and the value system, and just have open conversations with people around, hey, profitability, you know, it's not the devil. You can actually mix a passion or your religious beliefs and still be successful in this way or in that way.
I'm Ashley Kurzer, and I'm the founder and CEO of Skip the Small Talk. And that's a company I started about 4 years ago. You're the first person publicly I'm telling this to.
And all our listeners.
And all your listeners.
Tell us.
I'm actually considering the possibility of producing a YouTube series.
Nice.
That's going to be sort of like thinking of it as Mr. Rogers, but for modern age.
I love it. It's funny because I used to hold my like, oh, I'm embarrassed. I don't know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. If I don't say anything, then nobody knows I'm clueless.
Right.
And I really had to work to shift my own mindset to be like, yeah, man, I'm learning. And it's cool that I don't know this. Hey, anyone, Bueller? Yeah, cool. You're it. Come on.
Yeah, right. I honestly, like, such a big part of being a leader isn't doing everything perfectly. It's knowing where you need help.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned the hard way. You can't do it all yourself.
You can't do it all yourself, right? And the leaders who are like putting out on their social media and their blogs and they're like, I'm doing everything. It's like, that's not someone I want to follow. You must not. Do you sleep? Like, that's my first question is like, do you like, what's your self-care plan?
It's a great way to burn out. It's a great way to burn out fast.
Great way to burn out, right? Yeah. And protecting, you know, I use the cup, the inner resource of like, just protecting your energy and protecting like, this is how I'm going to say no.
Right.
right? And not feel bad about saying no. Be like, I'm just not the person that can help you, or like, I can't solve your bag of drama. Like, I want to see you thrive as a human, as a learning being, but like,
yeah. And saying no, it still feels bad to me sometimes. Like, I think I had to learn, like, just because it feels bad in the moment doesn't mean it's bad for me. And I think, like, having some more nuance around it, that like I can say no and feel a little off as I notice that person's face droop a little bit, but like when I go home, it feels like a relief that I said no and that I was honest about what I was capable of.
Good. You listen to your inner self. Way to go. I support you.
Thanks. I mean, it's despite, lots of voices in my head being like, no, don't do it. Like, people aren't going to like you if you say no. You're not going to be successful if you say no. But, just because those voices exist does not mean that they are correct. I think the take-home lesson I had.
Totally. You can acknowledge those voices and be like, thank you, next. As my girl Ariana says, thank you, next.
Exactly. I will swipe left on that. Thank you so much.
And we're good.
Yeah.
One of my favorite questions to ask all my interviewer and my podcast guest is, what's your favorite art?
What is my favorite art? Oh my goodness. What a delightful question.
I know, right? Because I think it touches on a lot of the themes that we've chatted about today. There's a great quote from Darren Walker. He's the CEO of the Ford Foundation, and he says, without art, there is no empathy. And without empathy, there is no justice.
That's gorgeous. I think, I think that's really apropos. I don't think you can fight for people's rights or fight for people if you're not able to empathize with them. And so I think such a way to get to justice is through empathy. That's beautiful.
Empathy. And art stirs up so many emotions.
It does. Oh man. Okay. So this is actually a very on the nose answer, I would say. So I would say I just watched, like a few weeks ago, I watched a movie, Won't You Be My Neighbor, which is a Mr. Rogers documentary.
Great.
And I just think everything Mr. Rogers does is one of the most beautiful pieces of art ever. Like I've been watching some episodes of Mr. Rogers, and he writes like this lyrics that are just so surprisingly poignant but understandable for a kid. And it's just I dare, for those listening, I dare you to watch the movie Won't You Be My Neighbor and not sob aggressively.
Okay.
It's I would say that's my favorite piece of art, because I think it does encourage so much empathy. And honestly, the biggest thing is it relays a message that you like, it makes people feel loved. And I think that is, Mr. Rogers believed that like that was the most important thing you could do for a child. And that's what I think is the most important thing you could do for anyone, is to make them believe that they are capable of being loved and capable of loving. And if art can do that, oh my God, like, I think that's gotta be it for me.
That is amazing. I'm going to put that link in the show notes so that everyone can watch it. I haven't watched it, so it's going in my
Rachel.
queue.
Yes, good.
One of my favorite similar documentaries is called The Mask You Live In.
And it's the work.
Yeah, it's the work of Ashanti Branch. He's an educator in Oakland, and he works with young men, and he helps to kind of tease out like, what is the mask that you like present to other people, like externally, but like what's behind the mask? Like, what are you feeling like inside, right? And it talks about all the masculine stereotypes that we teach society. Like, I'm not going to be gender specific, but like we teach folks that, this is how masculine needs to show up. And it's, in my opinion, counterproductive.
Yeah. There's so much pressure.
That feeling of love, right? And that feeling of like genuine acceptance for all the emotions that I'm feeling as a wonky human, as a developing adolescent, male or female or non-binary, like just to feel loved and accepted.
Yeah. Ugh. I'm so glad that media like that exists now. Like that would have been unfathomable in like, you know, I don't know, 50 years ago or 100,
yeah.
you know, like
Easily.
at the beginning of television, like, you know, it was just like, you know, I don't know, it was a lot of very anti-human content, like laughing at other people's like misfortunes. It was a lot of like, you know, and news, which is basically that. And
litany of misfortunes.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think that compassionate media is like having a moment right now, and I like could not be happier.
Yes, that is why I started my podcast, to spread love and humanity. And even though we're at work, we can still care and be compassionate. Oh, not to derail, but like when I work with clients and they're like, how do you want me to answer? The way I am at work or the way I am at home? And I'm like, ooh,
no. Yeah.
Let's bring that together.
Yeah. Wow. I think that question encapsulates so much of the problem with leaving your humanity at home and why that is even a question. And it's not their fault as individuals. It's just culturally, culture has pressured people to make those two things very different.
Exactly. Yeah. The fact that we have to ask that question, and it's like, it has struck me. It's a frequent question. It's not just a random question, right? Like, frequent question is, how do you want me to answer this? The way I am here or the way I am there? And it's like, ooh, yeah, let's reconcile that walk talk match. Oh, here we go, bring it all around. That walk
full circle.
Right? Like, let's have you show up as your genuine self, as your learning being that you were meant to be, and love and care for those around us.
My name is Shonda Lewis. Currently, I am a program director for social and emotional learning at an organization called Boston After School and Beyond.
What is your favorite art?
Music. Like I'm one who, like, I don't understand how people get in the car and like drive in silence. You know, how
That's me.
Like I have friends who are so expressive, and like when they're in the car with them and it's silent. I just like to drive in silence. I'm like, drive in silence.
Who does that?
Where every moment I get, I need to, you know, every free moment I get, I want to fill it with music. But yeah, I think in general, creativity is amazing. I mean, that's another human skill. Skill, creativity, like, and being able to express yourself is just so whatever way that you know that allows you to do that, do it. Try not to let things inhibit that creativity in you, and let other forms of creativity inspire you.
Yeah. I remember early in my career, I was very self-conscious, and I was very like, no, I need to like follow the steps. And I happened to like mention to my boss at the time, I was like, oh, no, I'm not very creative. Like, oh, that's for other people. And he's like, no, you're very creative. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So I think I definitely experienced that of like, no, you have to not be creative. You have to like put your head down and work hard and like do the thing, which, you know, when I finally got in touch with that creativity, I really finally let myself explore that. I realized how much of that was in my history, right? My father's mother was a graphic designer and was an artist and made arts and crafts for our entire family. And those are our most cherished family tokens, right? Like when Grammy O'Neil made Christmas ornaments for us, it was amazing, right?
Yeah.
And then on my mother's side, her father was a painter. I mean, like, yes, he painted houses, but he also did, this is not his work, this is someone else's, but he also did like wall paintings. And I'm like, both sides of my family have art in them. I'm like, I gotta have something in me. And I finally found it, which I think has helped me be a more empathetic person. But I'm also an introvert, so I can drive 4 hours in a car without music.
That's cool. But you are creative. I can see, you know, you like to express yourself. And
my little streak. You
always have this streak, and like, so you're not afraid to, and that's kind of where, you know, I would love for everyone to be able to get to that place where they're just not afraid to be themselves.
Oh, it is such a healthy place, right? And my heart goes out to the youth that feel that they can't express themselves, that feel like they have to be, conform to a certain majority perspective or standard, right? My heart goes out to individuals in transition, with their gender reassignment, like, my heart absolutely goes out to them, right? Because there's so much internal struggle going on that they can't let their fullness come forward, right? Yeah. It just makes my heart cry.
Yeah. Yep. But I think that's it. Like, I guess it's in general, it's tough to find ways to lead. I think you have a majority of people that, find it a lot easier to follow and to not just like step into their stance and be who they are, no matter what you also have like so many implications and consequences to be and doing that. So yeah, how do we build the strength and courage up in people, to be able to step into who they truly are, and then also, build that resilience, overcome those struggles. And usually when you have like these adverse experiences, it causes trauma, right? Because it gets stored, stored in your hippocampus. Your hippocampus, where memories are stored, as a adverse experience, as a traumatic experience, and that's where post-traumatic stress comes from. And but if you're able to flip it, if we're able to teach people like, no, like stick up for who you are, be yourself, and yes, you're going to have these experiences, but don't get discouraged, whatever, like that, this too shall pass, or we'll help you through that. Like, how do we flip it and help them turn it into positive experience, or like an experience that they're able to overcome. My life mission is to build resilient people in general, and one of my life missions. But how do we just do that and allow people, and hopefully be able to live in a world, or get closer to living in a world where people can be who they want to be.
My name is Aliana Pinheiro, and I am the Impact Director at Boston Impact Initiative. I have experience in impact investing, social enterprise, finance, and it's sort of all melded together to, appear in this position at Boston Impact Initiative a couple years ago.
What is your favorite art?
My favorite art is dance. I love to dance. My sister is a dancer. I have a sister who's 2 years younger than me. She recently started a nonprofit in Boston and using like hip hop and dance to work with young people in Boston, but really any type of dance. I grew up in Boston and was in the city dance program for a couple of years. So the Boston Ballet had this program where they would pick up, inner city kids and, just in case they could find a star in, the mid 90s in Boston. I would go to the Boston Ballet and take lessons, and they also gave us free so it was free lessons, and then they would give us free tickets to every show because they wanted us to like be sort of like steeped in ballet culture.
Love it.
And so we would go, my mom and I would go to every Boston Ballet production for 2 years when I was in 4th and 5th grade. And so I love ballet. I've always loved ballet. Just love all different types of dance. I think that expression through movement is so powerful, and the integration with music is so powerful, and the movement in groups or with a partner, just all of this, I think, is very relational, is very kind of interactive. There's a lot of culture involved as well. And those are all things that really fascinate and inspire me, culture, relationships, kind of the group dynamic of anything, but especially a dance, but of an organization or
good. I'm glad you went there. Yeah,
of a company. So dance is my favorite medium to watch, to do, to be a part of.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, I can definitely see how like that, the collective group dancing, right? And like how that can parlay into organizations, right? Groups of humans doing this beautiful orchestra to make cupcakes or to bake, or, you know, other examples, fresh food generation, right? Like, to make this wonderful thing, this orchestra of people need to move and coordinate. That's awesome.
Yes. That is a great interview question. It is. Because you learn a lot about someone. It's personal. I might use that as a check-in question at our next staff meeting.
Go ahead.
I'll give you credit.
Go ahead. There's great enough sunshine. There's enough art in the world for everyone to find something that resonates with them, right? Because a lot of my work is understanding empathy for other humans, right? And especially when we talk about power distribution, right? And like not being the pinnacle and like typically the white man on top making the decisions. Like, let's try a different way. What could that look like, right? Like, let's try a different way. Let's stir up and let's acknowledge those emotions. And maybe those emotions are like, oh, panic. What if I'm not in charge? What if I don't get my way? Okay, well, like, let's get a lot to unpack here.
Right.
Thank you, listeners, for joining my podcast journey. I have no idea where this journey is going, and I appreciate the company, truly. We're incorporating your feedback into the next season, so see you soon. Oh, and thank you for sticking around. I almost forgot. What is my favorite art? Art brought to Burning Man continues to impact my life the most. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, you'll see a few images. First up, I adore the sculpture Love, a Ukrainian artist brought to 2015 Burning Man. I only saw it in pictures, yet it moved me. I instantly felt the emotions captured in the sculpture. Then I had the opportunity to help build a sculpture in 2017 and 2018. Building art at Black Rock City required everything we've discussed during this season: empathy, growth mindset, superpower, and many more skills. Skills that are transferable into everyday life as we strive to be the best version of ourselves. I was moved by another sculpture in 2019 when an artist in Norfolk, Virginia, Chris Green, rendered his imagination of the sculpture. Thank you, Chris. I instantly felt the joy he captured in his sketchbook of a little boy and a giant birthday cake. So that year, when I arrived on Playa, I immediately picked up a hammer to help build Mega Cake, a giant 4-tier birthday cake with propane candles. It was amazing. Thank you again for listening. We will see you in season 2.